Welcome to Paranormal M, where we explore the hidden and unexplained. Subscribe and turn on notifications to stay updated with our latest intriguing tales. We hope you enjoy the adventure. Many times when I was living in Australia, did I have paranormal encounters while growing up. While I lived with my mother, she said that she'd experienced quite strange things happening in our house, from the kettle turning on randomly, even whenever we got a new kettle. From her feeling uncomfortable during the night, when I got to about 10, I believe, one night I got up to use the toilet. I remember seeing a man standing in our hallway, which really scared me. I ended up screaming for my mom to help after running back to my bed. I remember telling her what I saw. Well, I think she actually was maybe going to believe me, which I think helped me cope a bit. On other times, which this one still scares me the most. Around the same time I was 14, I was in the same house. It was at 6 a.m. in the morning. I woke up to a strange feeling. Someone was watching me from next to my bed, the way my back was facing. I slowly turned to see a shadow silhouette. It was standing next to me. It was faceless. I didn't make a noise or anything, but I punched where the silhouette was. When I realized what I did, I laid back straight down away, in a fetal position. A very strong feeling of fear and anxiety washed over me. I couldn't move. I thought it would do something to me. I stayed there like that for about 20 minutes. Slowly turned to find out that it wasn't there anymore. After I moved into my grandparents' house at about 15, I'd started to feel the same things I felt at my mom's about 2 months in. One night I heard what sounded like bare feet running to and from my bedroom door to the back outside door. It was a wooden floor. It was pretty quick footprints. It was like it was running. Then it would stop dead right outside my door. Then it would wait a few seconds and start running again. I texted my grandma asking if she or my grandfather were walking around. Luckily, she normally walks up to texts and she replied no. I guess she woke up. I then said, could you please come down the stairs with our dog and turn the lights on? As soon as she walked out with the dog, I could hear my dog barking and then my grandma walking up to the door. Completely different footsteps. Weird stuff would happen all the time. I'd always feel like something was watching me. I invited my girlfriend over when me and her were 16. She stayed the night with me, and maybe 1 p.m. I could hear the footsteps again. So I woke her up and said, can you hear that? Without saying anything, she listened and then nodded to me yes. Did the same thing. Texted my grandma asking if she was moving about in the house. She said no, and then I got the courage to swing open the door. Trying to act tough in front of the missus, I guess. When I did, there was nothing. There was just a cold feeling of dread. There's 2 more times I'd experienced something, and one time I was having a strange dream of being, tickled in my sleep. I woke up to still feeling this feeling. Started freaking out, and I'm awake and feeling somebody tickling my body. I leaned over my bed, not really sure why. Looked at the floor in the pitch dark, and out of nowhere, this strange blast of air, which felt like sticking your head out of a car window at a high speed. It hits me in the face. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The last incident happened when I came back from living in Scotland. Where in Scotland, I had no issues at all, but I pull up to my grandparents' house with my ex-girlfriend. We were just having a chat in my car. I look in the front window of my grandparents' house and see the same shadow silhouette that I saw all those years ago. Once I get into the house after coming in through the back door, I can hear the radio switch on up in the front room, and about turns it off and says, I hadn't heard it turn itself on. What the fuck is it? For the past couple of years, I've had some weird things happening in my home. I always try to brush it off as I'm just tired as hell and seeing or feeling things, but I don't even know anymore. From time to time, I'll see shadows that are darker than dark, if that makes sense. They'd be peeking around the corners of me. As soon as I turn to full-on look, it'll pop out of view. been a time when I was turning off the lights in the front of the house and I was heading to bed. In the process of walking down the hall, I felt something again, darker than dark, like dashed in front of me. Maybe the size of a small, medium dog. I literally stepped out of the way. I shrugged it off and I went to bed. Most recently, I've been feeling something sit on the edge of my bed when I'm home alone and asleep. I'm a light sleeper, so the feeling always wakes me up. In one instance, it sat on the edge where I was facing. Felt the mattress sink in and heard the spring, and it scared the shit out of me. There's been a time when one of my child's toys went off in the middle of the night. Of course, I was home alone. The toy was like a DJ set where you have to touch the record for it to make scratching sounds. I heard the scratching noise while sleeping and it woke me up. Went into a room where it was still making that noise. Her TV was turned on in the middle of the night while I was alone. It was on a station about politics, which I know she doesn't watch. She was like 5 at the time. So I remember a few times my daughter was getting dressed for school and I had her door closed. She would open the door and ask, "Say, Mom." Then she would say that she heard her door handle being moved around and thought it was me trying to open the door. It's just us that live in that house, so I'm not sure if something's in my home or if it's good or bad, and I'm not sure if I'm just batshit crazy either. What do y'all think? I think we all have at least a teaspoon of batshit crazy. Something tried to kill me in my sleep. I, 27, was out of town over the weekend. I was visiting my family. No one in my immediate family has a spare room that at least I can sleep in, so I usually stay with my great-uncle. He lives in what was my great-grandmother's old house. The house is old, or pretty much in the same state that it was in that she died 11 years ago. She was kind of evil. She's particularly not liking me and my siblings, and at one point even banned us for just coming to her house and swimming in her pool as children. The house is filled with pictures of her and her parents and other historic family memorabilia. The house itself is very eerie. Many family members feel uncomfortable in it and think it's haunted. On this trip, my uncle was out of town, but he still let me and my friends who was traveling with me stay there. My little sister, 17, decided to stay there that night with us, but was too scared to sleep in the room by herself. So she stayed in the same bed as me. Around 8 a.m. I woke up on the floor after slamming my head into the nightstand with blood running down my neck. My shirt was also torn. There was a giant scratch and a bruise across my back where it had been torn. My sister called my parents and my dad. Took me to the ER to get 10 staples in my head. We concluded that I must have fallen out of bed, something that's never happened to me before. I've slept in that room dozens of times, and I've never come close to doing that. The amount of momentum it would have taken for me to bust my head open to the extent of needing 10 staples is something I don't even think I could have achieved with being pushed. It's fairly unlikely that my sister would have pushed me out of the bed, although not entirely ruled out. I believe some kind of spirit may have been involved. The night after, I refused to sleep in that room. All 3 of us just ended up sleeping on couches in the living room. The next morning, I was packing my things in that room with my mom. Randomly sliced my foot open on something stuck in the carpet. When I tried to find whatever it was, there was nothing there. My mom, who's extremely spiritual as a person, with scary, accurate intuition, she said that she's never felt stronger about leaving a room. That morning I also realized that a baby picture of my great-great-grandmother that I usually turn over when I stay there, because it freaks me out, was still upright and facing the bed. I had forgotten to turn it over. Anybody have any ideas? Are there any demons or spirits with the reputation for doing this? Is it her? Is it the house? Is it me? My partners joke that my bloodline's cursed for all 3 years we've been dating due to many tragedies and freak accidents people in my family are prone to. What do I do? Hire a witch to break the curse? That's an interesting first thought. Intelligent Orb Encounter. Hello everybody, I want to share an encounter I had when I was about 14 years old in 2008. I was home alone one evening and was playing computer games. I was in the lounge room when out of the corner of my eye I noticed something move. I turned to look at the object that caught my attention. The best way I can describe it is a ball of glowing white, like nearly see-through light. When I locked eyes on this object, it reacted in a way that gave me the impression that it was surprised that I was able to see it. It then quickly hovered through my lounge and down the hallway as I watched in disbelief. It made minimal noise, and the noise itself is hard to put into words, but I can describe it best as the sound of a light breeze of wind. I didn't get the feeling this orb was evil or had any hostile intention, and to this day it remains the biggest unanswered question of my life. I'm not one to easily believe in the paranormal, but it does have me scratching my head all these years later. Was it a spirit? A visitor from another dimension? Trick of the brain? Whatever it was, it moved intelligently and was aware and surprised I was able to see it. Any feedback or theories or even personal experiences are welcome and appreciated. The noise that follows me. When I was growing up, my mom had this type of metal cradle and basket used for storing food. It was broken, and when it rocked, it made a very distinctive sound. Removing items from it, bumping it, whatever, the sound was a common occurrence. I found myself annoyed at constantly hearing it, and one day I mentioned as such. Pretty soon after, I started hearing it at night. Got up to check, thinking something was out there. I'd enter the kitchen to see it rocking by itself. Thought there was some explanation. I just went back to bed. This was one of the least odd things that went on in my childhood home, so I barely even reacted. I don't believe that the house is haunted because my mom built it. However, the land is a different story. But Mom's house and its weirdness is a topic for a different post. Anyway, I heard that noise all the time, even after the basket was gone. When I'd move, I wouldn't hear it for a while, but eventually the noise will find me again, and I'll hear it at night when I'm alone or feeling low and emotional. I can never find the source. The new house. I bought my house in 2013. I was aware that before we moved in, an elderly lady had lived there for around 4 years before passing away. We never learned if the woman passed away in the house, but I wasn't really worried about it at the time. And this is just for context, as I'm not actually sure to this day that everybody actually died in the house. First occurrence was June 2013. One night before we moved the furniture to our house, my wife and our 2 toddlers were painting. It was getting late. My wife decided that she would take the kids and head to my parents' house for the night. While I was painting alone in the master bedroom, I heard the toilet seat slam down violently in the guest bedroom on the other side of the wall where I was painting. I mustered my courage and walked around the corner. Down that hallway, stepped into the bathroom and turned on the light, only to find the toilet seat was up. Second occurrence. December 2013. It was around Christmas time. We just finished loading up the car to head back to Florida from Texas. I'd just gotten into the car that parked in the garage facing the road. My wife was inside checking that everything in the house was set for a week trip. Shortly after I had sat down, just started the car. My wife sat down next to me and shut the door. Almost immediately after my wife sat down, I saw a figure of a person walk behind the car in the rearview mirror. Look at my wife, and ask if she saw that. With a cold look of fear in her face, she muttered, "Yeah." I searched the house for 15 minutes and found nothing. Last occurrence, 2016. It was late and I was heading to the office playing Minecraft on my PC. I fell asleep while playing in my chair with my shirt off and woke up to the touch of a hand on my chest from behind me. While still half asleep, I started to open my eyes and I felt nails digging into my skin and yelped. I went into the living room, flipped on the light, and had 3 claw marks on my left side of my chest. Additionally, my wife had just been given 2 Japanese geisha dolls that were set on the mantel over a fireplace. I had a really eerie feeling upon looking at them as I walked into the living room and threw them away. So this may have been a separate entity. The dolls were bought in an antique shop and were a gift. I think my dog is a ghost. Okay, so last month we had to put my family dog down, who was 8 years old. Since then, my grandfather, grandmother, and I have all heard her walking with the jiggle of her collar tags. My grandfather hears noises from her bed at night like she's moving around in it. The other day I was cooking and felt something brush against me like she used to. Out of the corner of my eye, I swear I saw her. Been coping kind of weirdly. Haven't really come to terms with the fact that she's gone, so when I saw her, I reached down to pet her, which obviously when I looked, she wasn't there, you know. I've also felt her jump on my bed at night. The bed will move down like somebody got on it, but none of the other dogs jumped up. Finally, I think the craziest out of all of these, my neighbor told us that we should put her ashes, the collar, and favorite toy in her bed. When we placed her ashes down, the power completely turned off, then came back on a few seconds later. It's never happened before. I think that this is her, but it makes me sort of sad because I've always heard that spirits stay on Earth if they've unfinished business. But dying younger than most dogs makes me think that she died at the wrong time. It wasn't supposed to be her ending. A night shift in radiology. I worked in the radiology department in a hospital in Cardiff, Wales. It was about 3 years as an admin and a clerical officer before getting a promotion where I was working with medicine. During these 3 years, I saw a lot of things, ranging from patients dying in the MRI scanners to patients having an X-ray be inserted in like meat thermometer to their urethra. Whoa, wasn't ready for that. All right. I do that more professionally. During these 3 years, I saw a lot of things, ranging from patients dying in the MRI scanners to patients having an X-ray for inserting a meat thermometer into their urethra. Nights always seem the craziest. One time, a patient came in with armed police after an altercation which involved a knife in the middle of the city center. Just so happened that the person that we had the altercation with was having an X-ray too. This caused a second altercation right in front of me. Chairs were thrown, a trash bin or two, and then a wheelchair. So I've seen things, some funny, some stressful, some sad, and many times bonkers. This one night, something scary. I would start a night shift about 19 o'clock and then work until about 8:30 the next morning. This was a standard night shift for our department. We would usually do 3 nights in a row before going for 4 days off. After the 3rd night, you're ready to go sleep for a week. The strange thing was this was my first night of the 3, so I wasn't even at all tired. It started off normal. I arrived at the department, took over for the day staff, logged into my PC, and during the time we usually would set up our phones or tablets to watch the movies or latest TV series as there'd be a lot of downtime between patients. Like I said, the first few hours nothing that interesting, just your average run-of-the-mill night in radiology. Then it came to my break. Now before I tell you more, I should probably explain the layout of this hospital. This hospital is the largest in Wales. It's a teaching hospital. It's pretty old. Best way to get from A to B to this hospital is through what they call the tunnels or the catacombs. These consist of very dimly lit corridors, old abandoned rooms, tunnels, and other creepy, decrepit areas. The morgue is also found in these corridors, so it's not a nice place to be during the day, let alone the middle of the night. Just the quickest way to get to the place, if you're staff. There's always been rumors and mumblings of strange things happening in these tunnels. Some people say that they saw ghosts in old-fashioned porter uniforms taking wheelchairs to pick up patients. Others say they've seen the shadows following them from the corner of their eyes. But one person has claimed that they were attacked by people wearing an old nurse uniform from the 70s. This place is creepy even at the best of times. But for me, it never really fazed me. I've been down there hundreds of times before, and the worst experience up to this point was having a sluice pipe drip human waste in my head. That in itself was a horror show, but tonight would be something altogether different. maybe not even this physical world. Like I said before, very quiet night. Been watching the latest series of One Piece because I'm a geek. During my downtime, then a radiographer or radiology technician from my American friends out there, they come over and take a break and cover for me. I decided to go to the 5th floor with the sanctuary, multi-faith chapel, that's where it was located. I was on a night shift when one of the most beautiful places in the hospital was there, so... But to get there, I had to walk through the tunnels to reach the nearest elevator. I set off on my journey, which would usually take me about 15 minutes. Scanned my keycard at the main entrance of the tunnels and proceeded to walk through. 2 minutes in, I started to feel like somebody was walking behind me. Being a busy hospital and basically the tunnels acting like a highway, I didn't really think anything of it. Suddenly I heard panting like somebody was trying to catch their breath after going for an intense run. So I turned around to check and saw nothing. A bit strange, but thought it was nothing. Maybe just one of the pipes above my head creaking or a generator pumping, so I carried on walking. I kept feeling like someone or something was watching me. It was like walking behind me. Out of sheer confusion and fear, I missed my turn toward the elevators and found myself in a large section of the tunnels I'd never been in before. It was littered with old stretchers, beds, hospital furniture, and equipment. Some of this stuff was over 50 years old, maybe older, just left to decay in a dark, smelly, decrepit, and dusty corridor. So it was starting to really creep me out because, well, in all this confusion, I realized I was lost. It almost felt like I had fallen into the back rooms. Everything looked the same. I could feel a tightening in my chest, and I could feel the start of a panic attack. I remember clutching my chest and running down a corridor trying to find a signpost or something to tell where I was. The sense that something was watching me got stronger. Suddenly, I felt something hit my arm in force, almost like someone was using a baseball bat. I remember falling to the ground, pulled myself across the floor towards the cold, dusty wall, and looked around frantically trying to find an explanation of what in the heck just hit me. Something caught my eye. It's almost like a black mist, glowing red eyes. It was like 20 meters away from me, just hovering in the middle of the corridor. Was this the thing that just had been stalking me the entire time? Got up and sprinted. Ran down what felt like 100 different corridors until I found a housekeeper, a janitor. He asked me what was wrong. I looked pale, but I couldn't get any words out. He then grabbed me by the arms with a firm grip and said, "Did you see it too?" That was the last time I ever stepped foot in those tunnels. And to this day I hear rumors of strange things. I'm not sure what I saw that night. Maybe I was just tired, maybe I was stressed, maybe it was something. Why else would the janitor ask me if I'd seen it too? What else is down there? Well, I can tell you one thing for sure. I won't be going to find out. The hospital I work in is the pretty much biggest one. It's in Wales in the UK in the capital city of Cardiff. It's pretty old and many of the areas are unused and in a state of disrepair. It's a big place. It's very easy to get lost and it can be very difficult to find your way out. There are a network of tunnels underneath the hospital, where the morgue is located in many abandoned rooms and corridors. It's dark, warm, smelly, dusty, and pretty creepy. Anybody else having deja vu? This is where I had my own encounter with something dark. I won't go into all the, everything now, but it's all in my original post. Definitely worth a read. I think the last post we read was the original post. I decided that I wasn't going to pretty much do everything, and, well, I was not going to step foot in the tunnels again, but I changed my mind for science. This is when my friend comes to the picture. Well, it's a different story. I decided if I was going to actively investigate the tunnels, I would need at least one extra person. So who better to ask than my friend Ryan? Ryan is a tall, stocky gym guy, so at least I had a bodyguard. He also works for security, so he's got a fairly decent idea of the layout of the tunnels. Perfect. Ryan doesn't believe in ghosts or unearthly things. Well, he didn't until today. I had heard a story of a girl who was thought to haunt a couple of abandoned rooms under the old children's wards. The children's hospital has a new shiny building on the other side of the campus, so these old children's wards are now strange rooms and patient file libraries mostly. We decided to meet up in the evening to go explore this area of the tunnel. As this was a hive for strange phenomena, well, Maybe if we had time, we would try some other active areas of the tunnel, but we've been outside the tunnel entrance at 2100 hours. We had a plan of action. Firstly, we go make our way to the old area of the tunnels and the rooms where this girl was said to have been seen. Secondly, we explore a little of some of the equipment and the furniture in the rooms. They were really old. Finally, we sat in the middle of one of the rooms and just see what would happen. Pretty simple. But then, if we had time, we would just go for a little bit of a wander. Like I said before, I had an experience in the tunnel a bit over a year ago now, which is still fresh in my memory. But I have Ryan here, so I'm sure everything will be fine. So we scanned our cards and the door to the tunnels opened. I won't lie, I was very much on edge. We started walking to the tunnels and made our way through the first few sections. Then suddenly we realized we were in one of the old areas of the building. It then hit me like a ton of bricks. The reality of what I was doing. Am I crazy? I said to myself, no, this is for science. We got closer and closer to the section of the tunnel we were planning on going. The tunnels were dark and poorly lit. Ryan had pulled out his torch. It got so dark. Ryan then shone his torch on the wall. You could see old paintings of animals, clowns, of circus. Old painted faces that the children who attended the hospital painted and stuck on the walls. Perfect setting for a horror movie, isn't it? If I'm being honest, yeah, it was creepy, but I kind of expected something like this, so we carried on going. We finally got to the section of the tunnels we were wanting to get to. We looked around a little and noticed a few doors. 2 were padlocked, one had a padlock that had rusted and was hanging on by thread. The other door had been rotted and basically was dust. Put on our face masks because we're careful guys and because black mold and asbestos are real things. Proceeded to enter the rotten doorway, and Ryan flashed his torch around there. There really wasn't much in there. Maybe a couple of chairs and an old desk. Nothing worthwhile. So I moved to the next room. I pulled the rusted padlock, which disintegrated in my hands, and then pushed the door open. And I mean, man, the smell that hit us from that room was disgusting. It was a moldy, sticky liquid covering the whole of the floor. We noticed an old gallon of jerry cans of iodine and other chemicals that spilled all over the floor, and the countless carcasses of dead mice and rats that littered the floor was crazy. We decided to skip the room and try one of the more secure doors. This is where things get creepy. Ryan decided he would ram one of the old doors with his shoulder, thinking it would dislodge the old hinges and make the door swing open. It did not. Instead, we heard what sounded like tapping coming from the other side of the door. Ryan just knocked into the door, thinking it was like a dripping pipe on the other side. Maybe it was a rat or something nibbling at the door panel. He did it in a typical dun-dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun-dun beat. The tapping stopped and, well, we waited a couple of seconds, and as Ryan went to knock again, the exact same beat knocked back at us. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. I froze and turned and locked eyes with Ryan. The utter shock in his face told me he probably made a massive mistake. Suddenly, before I even had a chance to run, Ryan passed out and fell into my arms. I wanted to run and leave him there, but he's my mate, and I know he would do it for me, so I started to drag him way out through the door, and the knocking stopped, and there was just complete silence. A couple of seconds after, Ryan started to wake up, and suddenly he shot up and screamed, "Mannin!" I jumped a mile and said, "What are you talking about?" He said back to me, "Mannin! It's Mannin!" I looked at him, and he's just staring into the darkness at the end of the tunnel. I realized Mannin was the girl who was supposed to have haunted the area. Maybe she was the one knocking back at us. I told Ryan we should probably find a way out. We both stood up and slowly shuffled away from the door. As we turned to face the way we came in, the door knocked again. The handle started to turn. At that point, I tapped out and started running to the exit. Ryan running beside me, we decided to go longer as the shortcut was more dark areas and at least longer was fairly lit. But as we got to the cross junction, Ryan turned back and screamed. I'd never heard him scream before. Turned around, and there in the middle of the corridor was a floating black mist with glowing red eyes. The exact same thing I saw before. Face contorted and almost had a child likeness to it. Screamed and wailed at us, and just vanished. Couldn't get out of the tunnel quick enough. We managed to get to the exit, and we just fell on the floor and just looked at each other. We both agreed not to tell anybody not tell anybody else a word about this. But we decided to get help from the hospital chaplains, because that thing was manning. Jailhouse Horrors. I work full-time as a deputy sheriff in a very rural part of the northern U.S., right outside of a Native American reservation. Although I do several things for the sheriff's office, I mainly work inside the sheriff's building itself and in the jail. In my time in law enforcement, I've seen many things I can't understand, but here are some of the most memorable. Medium security madness. Inside the jail lies a medium security housing unit. The inmates stay within their cells from 2200 to 0500. During that time, several inmates are allowed to go out and assist with cleaning and laundry duties. I've always had a weird feeling inside the cell block, but every once in a while my fellow officers and even some inmates see a man that we call the Watcher. Late at night as officers walk the cell block, we'll constantly see a man behind us wearing white inmate worker clothes. Sometimes when you turn your head to check behind you, and sometimes it's right in front of you. Never seem to know when you'll see him. Do a double take as a result of him being gone. He appears to every officer the same, and to some senior guys it's a rite of passage for when younger officers ask about the long-haired old guy out of the cell at night. Well, this is compounded by the fact that old cries for help are heard occasionally only for officers to run out of the office checking cell to cell for somebody in distress, only to always find no one awake. I personally believe that I've heard my last name called to me while sitting in this housing unit. Heard it plain as day next to me. There's no one awake, and all the inmates were asleep and accounted for. This particular housing unit has a long history of suicides, overdoses, and violent fights for the better majority of the last 3 decades. My first paranormal encounter here started even without my prior knowledge. Other officers only disclosed the information after I inquired. Hell's Kitchen, literally. The kitchen is another hotbed of activity, with 2 spirits appearing in the same manner and performing the same activities to each other each time we see them. The first is a larger man, maybe 6 foot, 250 pounds. Nearly every officer who's seen him describes him in the same context. He can be seen as soon as you unlock the kitchen and look up from your keys. He's dressed in white kitchen worker clothes, standing at the sink washing his hands. It's as if he's about to start his shift. My first encounters happened right after I was off FTO and started night shift. For nearly 2 weeks straight, I would see him do a double take only to see nothing in his place. For weeks, I thought I was crazy, not asking anybody or anything about him. Only after one day that my supervisor comes running into the office screaming about seeing something in the kitchen, only for his horror to be compounded when I gave an exact description of the individual and the task he was performing. My supervisor is a devout Mormon and a firm critic of anything supernatural was scared badly. He refused to enter the kitchen for a long period of time. The second spirit of the kitchen is the exact opposite of the man in white. He's faceless and only a faint orange glow is seen. The same shade as an inmate's jumpsuit. He's seen when you go to lock the kitchen door. The squeak of the inmate's shoe is heard and an orange glow rushes you, as if he's trying to escape the kitchen before the door's closed. The kitchen also has a history of inmate death, with records from the 90s reporting of inmates breaking in and using the kitchen knives to slit their wrists. Maximum security, the non-stop horror. Maximum security. No place in the entire jail has more terror than the maximum security wing. Activity is non-stop from random doors slamming to lights turning on and off. A personal favorite of mine is when you're there and the inmates can be seen at night walking the top tiers on cameras, and in person, only for you to rush in about to confront an inmate for being out past bunk up, only for every door to be secure. Random screams are heard coming from areas where no inmates are housed. Footsteps happen so regularly that many officers don't even react anymore. But my all-time favorite is the time when an officer witnessed a female inmate through one of the white glass. exited her cell in the middle of the night without him unlocking it. The inmate processed, wrapped a noose around her neck, climbed the railing, and jumped off top tier. Several officers witnessed this happen. Radio calls to dispatch were made, emergency tones rang out, only for officers to open the cell block door, make entry, and see nothing. The odd thing about this incident was that the cell block only housed male inmates, but several years prior was a dedicated female housing block. Cell 19. One cell in the jail has been a shithouse in particular over the last several years. Cell 19 has housed dozens of inmates, but most either have some mental episode that results in them being institutionalized or moved out within a few days. Examples include completely normal inmates going to bed only for them waking up in the morning to screaming and rushing out and giving an evangelical sermon warding off evil. Normal inmates get housed only to have a horror show of a health issue in the day following, heart attacks, strokes, and seizures for inmates normally for good moderate health. In the most recent cases, an inmate who was like a prior co-worker of mine in another job attacked several officers inside the cell following cries for help. It took 6 officers, a taser, pepper spray, and a restraining chair to subdue him. The reason why officers responded was he was choking out his cellmate. It was completely without cause. Following this, the inmate was placed in observation. Was seen taking off his socks and shoving them to his mouth only for him to be saved from passing out when an officer took them out. The inmate in question the next day has been seen looking directly into the camera and breaking his hand seemingly without pain. The man's in his 70s. Conclusion. Many things can be explained to simply being in a high-stress environment and, well, the nature of the jail. But many things experienced by officers with no prior knowledge of the happenings. The fact that they happen so often is why I felt the need for posting. If you think the story's false, then simply consider it entertainment. I don't know what this could possibly be. We live in the Balkans, southeastern Europe. About 5 years ago, my mother, grandmother, and aunt went to another city to meet a woman. She's a Muslim woman who uses specific methods with molten lead, water, and reciting Quran verses, the Muslim holy book, to see or hear or simply know information about my family. They've never seen that woman before, but she lives 100 kilometers away from us. So she gets her, lead, drops it in the water, and recites something along the way, and then she takes that bowl and circles around you and so on. Their visit was a family secret for a long time until my mother told it to me. Then asked my aunt and grandma individually without them knowing anything in advance, and all of them told me the exact same story. The woman asked them if my infant father went to the hospital on the 40th day since birth, because of his face redness and Because of his face redness and constant crying, they answered yes. She then said that happened because somebody put some kind of witchcraft on him that night. The woman asked my grandmother if she had a tap next to the house with a white cloth over it, and she answered yes. The woman told her to burn that cloth because somebody put it there to harm her. She then asked my grandmother if you found any dead birds in your backyard recently. She answered yes. Well, she thought it was her cat leaving those birds there. The woman told her, no, it's a person who does it. This is one of the most bizarre, and you don't have to believe me, but she asked my aunt if she lives in a flat, and she said yes. She then asked her if the door threshold is out of stone, and it's broken in 2 parts. She said yes. She then said lift the threshold, and underneath you will find a small pouch full of sand. Immediately get rid of it. That sand is from the grave of one of your relatives. When my aunt returned home, she really found it. All 3 of them were absolutely shocked and in fear. But they're all Muslims, so they say that the woman simply can communicate with jinn, invisible creatures in Islam. I'm not a Muslim, and I believe that this is something else. But then after some research, I found that the lead ritual dates back to pagan Rome. Why did no one ever talk about it if it works like this? I don't understand anything. How would a stranger know what happened when my father was born 45 years ago? How could she know about that white cloth on the tap? How could she know about the little sand pouch in the front of the flat? She doesn't even know where we're from. This is too much for my brain to process. Am I psychic? My story. I'm Sophie, 25 years old. I've had a running joke between my friends and family of being a psychic, although in recent years I'm starting to genuinely believe I am. So I've always believed in spirits and life beyond death. I grew up in a haunted house for the first 9 years of my life. Never something followed us to the next house, or we got unlucky and moved into another haunted house until I was 18. My first experience with the paranormal was my imaginary friend called Millie. According to my parents, he used to frighten me and make me cry, because I was a toddler until I was about 6 years old. I remember when I was around 6 or 7, my sister had her friend over for a play date. For some unknown reason, I felt the need to say, "Millie's getting jealous." My mom and my sister and her friend left the house to go to the park, but upon our return, all of the bed sheets had been ripped off the duvets and they were scattered along the bedroom floor. My sister and I shared a bedroom growing up. The TV was face down on the floor, but the screen wasn't shattered. We're talking like 90s early tube TVs. The huge ones, like the smash sound when they fall from that height, right? But another experience growing up in the same house was around when my grandpa died. Bought a Disney Castle toy for my sister shortly before it passed away unexpectedly. It had a clock tower on it. Not an actual clock, just a sticker of a clock with a toy that made it sort of a bell sound. After my grandpa died, bang on midnight, you bet that clock tower would start going off. This really frightened me and my sister as we were really young at the time. After a few sleepless nights full of crying, my mom eventually shook the batteries out. Peace. Or so we thought, because again, for a week after that clock continued to go off at midnight. Super spooky. My mom threw that toy away, and I don't blame her. I've had countless of other experiences growing up, but this would turn into an essay. So let's get on to why I think I'm psychic. I have nighttime hallucinations since I was a toddler. I'd wake up at night and see people or animals in my room, usually staring at me or running at me or just not noticing them there. Got put down to me being young, but still happens now and I'm 25. I hear random words and voices before I fall asleep. Some of the things I've heard or seen are so random I can't imagine it's something my brain would make up. Here's some of the sightings and psychic experiences that I've had. An old lady peering through the ladder of my bunk bed, furious face sticking her middle finger up at me, well, shortly after my family moved into an old house. Seen 3 girls crouching on the floor, hiding and cowering away from my dream catcher. Countless black shadows and scary, unsettling entities in my room. Once when I was 9, I woke up to my mom stood with her back to me. I spent what felt like 10 minutes asking her if she's okay and why she was there, just for my mom to call out from her bedroom, "Shut up, Sophie, it's 3 a.m. Safe to say, I hid underneath my covers and cried, realizing that my mom wasn't stood with her back to me. I dreamt of Michael Jackson the night before he died. Interesting. I dreamt of my dog a year before we got him, but I didn't realize this until he grew up, as I saw him as an adult dog, not a puppy, so it took me a while to realize. In October of 2019, I had a dream that I was on a bus in my local area. The streets were completely empty. There's no people or cars, and it was like a ghost town. Got off the bus, went to the woods, and saw my gran, who's been dead for 10 years. She was so vivid, and I could smell her old perfume, and she was even wearing her red coat. She hugged me and told me, "Things are going to get strange for a while, Sophie. But you're strong, and it'll be fine. I love you so much." Never thought much of that dream until COVID hit and the lockdowns began. I believe she was warning me about COVID, especially as I have severe asthma. I've experienced a severe 4-day migraine 3 times before a traumatic event that's happened in my life. As soon as that event has happened, the migraine disappears. It's a running joke with my family now that if I get a migraine, everybody needs to hide. Toys would regularly move around at night on their own. This has ended up with me developing a phobia of certain Barbies and China dolls because of this. One night when I was around 14, I woke up screaming, "Don't drink it!" Exact same moment I woke up screaming. My 7-year-old brother woke up screaming too. He said they had a scary man in his room offering to drink. Makes my blood run cold still typing it. My mom and sister were awake at the time and said we both screamed at the exact same time, so there's no way it was one of us waking the other person up. Super scary. One time when I was 18, I was having a sleepover with my friend. I woke up to see a bald, terrifyingly thin man-looking creature crawling toward me on the bed. Behind him was a tall, pitch-black shadow man. Must have been 7 foot. My dog was there, and he was growling and barking at the crawling man toward me, trying to protect me. My friend Ben woke up and started screaming, "Who are you?" As soon as we turned on the light beside the bed, they vanished. It took us an hour to muster the courage to run out of the house. We drove to Tesco and sat in the car park until it was light outside again. Ben still brings it up sometimes on the being of, one of the scariest moments of his life. I often know when something is wrong with a friend or family. I say what people are thinking, feel people's emotions, know when someone's about to call or text me. Dreamt of my ex cheating on me the night before he broke up with me. Found out he was cheating 2 weeks later. My mom also had similar things happen, not to the extent of me. My mom's side of the family say that we're in tune with the spiritual side of this universe. I guess I feel like a fraud saying I'm without an unbiased opinion. What do you guys think? What intentions does this entity have? Okay, so here's what happened. My parents' house has somewhat been always haunted, from moving shadows, moving stuff, and strange sounds in the night. Anyways, a long time had happened since the last occurrence. But then about a week ago, my mom was in her room taking care of 2 of my nieces, 4 and 5 years old. They were all watching TV. Obviously they were alone, but when suddenly they heard 2 knocks at the door of the room, my mother proceeds to ask, "Who is it?" A high-pitched voice says in a very smooth tone, "It's me." My niece starts screaming, "It's a ghost, it's Uncle Nino." Because I used to play with them that I'm a ghost and I can chase them throughout the house, and I was doing some errands with my girlfriend at the time and nowhere near my mother's house. So then she stands up and she also thought that it was me playing a joke on my nieces. But when she opens the door, no one was there. She then proceeds to check the house cameras and no one is in the house. A week passes by. And yesterday she was again alone in the house with only the dog in her room. She hears somebody tries to open the door and the dog gets startled and starts sniffing and looking at the door. She asks again, "Who is it?" And a now angry male voice responds, "It's me!" So she runs to open the door and again nobody was there. The mother starts cursing and saying, "If you have nothing good to say, please leave this house." Closes the door. Anybody know what this means, or what does an entity like this want? I'm concerned because I've heard that when an entity can communicate, it means it's very powerful. I fully believe my mother because I've experienced paranormal stuff in their house before, and well, she wasn't the only one to listen to that thing. Please help. Someone was breathing down my... So, my grandma's farm. For security reasons, I will not say precisely where, but in Norway. It's now been in my family since the mid-1600s. But the walls inside the walls are from, we think, long before that, around the late 1300. So that makes it over 500 years old. Back to the story. So I was just watching a movie with some of my family in my grandma's farmhouse, sitting in a rocking chair 2 or 3 meters from the others, when I feel breathing just behind my neck and up my ear, and a voice that sounds like an old man who says, "Onsen." In English, it's the equivalent of "oh no." I abruptly turned around and asked my mom. She said something since, well, she was behind, but 2 to 3 meters or so from me. She said no. I asked the others if they said that. Told them later what happened, and my mom told me a story of 20 years back when she was at home after she was done studying. She slept in the bed, and she usually didn't sleep at all on the farm, but she always got the feeling that someone was either lying next to her, watching her, sleeping, or what. This happened both when she slept and when she was walking around the room. After some weeks with this, she changed rooms to her childhood bedroom and it stopped. To this day, she doesn't like to sleep in that room any longer than she must. Now, no one pretty much sleeps in it, because it's so messy in there. Something sinister in the cabin. I just got back from a mini vacation with my wife in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. The cabin was in a populated area, but hidden most of the road from a hill. My first impression was that it was a little bit eerie, but I brushed it off and assumed it was just because of horror movies. The energy inside felt a little heavy, nothing I couldn't handle. I'm very sensitive when it comes to paranormal energies, and I've lived and worked in haunted places all my life. This cabin was different. The dark energy was overwhelming. Didn't sleep until daylight for 3 days when we were there. I had to sit in the living room where I saw shadows and the cord on the wall mounted phone swing and suddenly start and stop again. It was banging noises and the sound of somebody walking through the hallways. I absolutely couldn't take being in the bedroom. It was filled with mirrors. My wife would wake up every morning around 3, being able to fall back asleep. The third night I couldn't take it anymore. The dark feelings almost had me in tears and an anxiety attack. Left the next evening, taking a loss on our last night booked at the cabin. I just hoped that whatever it is didn't follow me home. Spooky experience in a motel in Washington State. For starters, this experience took place way back in 2015. I was talking to a friend of mine recently and mentioned the story. He convinced me to post this here. I don't use Reddit and rarely ever talk about this, so I'm by no means seeking any sort of attention or points. Chances are I probably won't even see any replies or anything. Well, you're on Paranormal M. And also note, I've had sleep paralysis before, but this was not that. I was still able to move and grab my phone. Context. In 2015, I was a college student outside of Seattle, Washington. A few friends of mine wanted to go on a spring break trip up to Ocean Shores. It's a small town on the coast of Washington State. Well, because we were broke college kids at the time, we decided to book the cheapest flight in town. Or place, sorry. A small hotel called Westerly Motel. We were a party of 5 people, 3 guys including me and 2 girls. We're all just friends and brothers, and we didn't really care about anybody sharing the same room, so we arrived at the Westerly Motel. Everything was fine. The place had a living room, a bathroom, and a small bedroom. It was pretty small overall, but hey, we got what we paid for. It was agreed that the 2 girls would get the bedroom and us 3 guys would sleep in the living room. There for 3 nights total. The trip itself was fine. There wasn't much to do in Ocean Shores, so our original plan was to see the ocean and the beach. But when we got there, it had all these really smelly and gross stuff washed up on shore. The local told us it was actually a fish or whale carcass. I have no idea how legit that was, but that was definitely not seaweed, and it smelled horrible. Nasty. The first 2 nights were completely normal. We all played board games and drank alcohol. It wasn't until the last night that my experience happened. The spooky experience. My 2 male friends slept on a couch and a chair. No idea how I was even able to sleep. I was the only person sleeping on the floor, and at around 4 a.m. I woke up. I didn't physically get up, but just opened my eyes. I remember reaching my arm over to grab my phone, seeing the time, and thinking, fuck, wish it was sunrise. Because the atmosphere was super spooky. It's hard to describe. The air felt stuffy and cold, and I know the phrase gets overused, but it literally felt like somebody was watching me. Closest thing I can compare it to is actually a video game about ghosts called The Fatal Frame. Throughout the game, there are certain rooms that have a high-pitched sound, indicating there's something in there for you to interact with. It gives you a sense of something is here, you know? I know that's a weird comparison, but it gives the most accurate feeling to what I felt that night in the motel room. I tried going back to sleep, but I felt so paranoid and scared that I couldn't. I remember my feet were actually shaking because I was so scared. I tried coughing a little to signal to my buddies on the couch, like, hey, you guys awake? Well, I didn't get any response. The weird thing was that I somehow just could instinctively tell that the source of all this fear was coming from the bathroom. I was closest to the bathroom because I slept on the ground. Like I could feel that something was not right with that bathroom. It scared the crap out of me even though I couldn't see anything. It also felt dangerous to move. Like the universe was saying, don't get up, don't move, just go back to sleep. You're not supposed to be awake right now. That's literally what it felt like. Thankfully, after 15 minutes or so, I was able to fall asleep. The next morning, everything was pretty much normal. As my friend and I were checking out of the hotel, I noticed while I asked the front desk, "Is this place haunted or something?" Chose not to. On the 3 or 4 hour drive back to Seattle, I casually said to my friends, "Hey, were you guys awake this morning?" And to my surprise, my friend actually said something like, "At 4 or 5 a.m.? I said, "Yeah." Then my friend said, "Yeah." Weirdly enough, it got quiet and we both just knew to leave the conversation at that. It was pretty awkward, but that was literally it. I could tell that he also experienced what I felt at 4 a.m. and just like me, didn't want to talk about it. It felt sort of cursed to talk about, honestly. Aftermath that scared me. That was the end of that experience, but fast forward to 2020 during COVID. I was bored. Stuck at home, that Ocean Shores trip came back to mind. I was curious and just Googled Ocean Shores Westerly Motel. First thing that came up was actually a COMO4 news article written in 2014. The article states that in 2014, at the exact motel we stayed at, there was a man who locked himself in the bathroom in a standoff against police. He started a fire and died of smoke inhalation in the bathroom before being taken to the hospital or something. You can find the article itself if you just Google KOMO News Westerly Motel. When I read it, it scared the hell out of me because I remember that night and remembered sensing something in that bathroom. I would definitely consider myself a skeptic, but that night felt very supernatural, like you could just feel it in the air that it was not normal. Before that, I just used to snicker at anybody saying that they felt watched, but, I get it now. I was looking at reviews of Westerly Motel and was secretly hoping somebody else had a similar experience, but alas, nothing. But yeah, just wanted to share the story. The motel is actually still around, so if by any chance anybody else experienced something like this, just know that you're not alone. And I second that gesture. Appreciate you and see you. I lived behind a graveyard. Yep, that's right. My family house backs up to a graveyard. In fact, we back up to one of the oldest cemeteries in the state. From my understanding, the land in my neighborhood was developed on in the 1970s was originally a fruit tree farm. Each of the homes on the street has at least one fruit tree on their property as a relic of the farm. My family had an apple tree. I know that these stories should always be taken with a grain of salt. I consider myself a pretty level-headed person. My parents are physicians and we operate under a very practical, realistic way of navigating life. And even with that understanding of how the world works, we've experienced things that have never been able to be explained. Growing up, the house always gave me an uneasy feeling. I constantly had the feeling I wasn't alone. I'd had something knock on my window in the middle of the night and I've heard footsteps down the hallway. I've seen an apparition, seen things fly off the table, and had countless other experiences, big and small, that were just normal occurrences. My mom also had interesting experiences, including old toys turning on when they had no batteries, things pushed from behind while gardening, seeing unexplained things from time to time. There'd be periods of more activity and periods of quiet. During the active moments, we would refer to the house as being loud. It was the loudest when nobody else, but it was the loudest when one of us would get sick. Perhaps one of the strangest moments was when we found a bone in our backyard. The bone was examined by our local forensics team. It was concluded that the bone was part of the end of a human femur, with an unknown origin. They didn't give a date, but they did say it was likely several hundred years old. Weirdly enough, we found it by accident. One morning, it was just sitting on the top of a flower bed maybe 20 feet from the house. and at this point the bone's family lore, and we've never been able to explain its existence. There's never been any evidence to suggest somebody was buried outside of the cemetery lines, but it certainly makes you wonder. No other bones were ever found. If you're ever wondering what they did with the bone, well, we kept it. Actually, when a very quick investigation concluded, a police officer came by to drop off the bone. Weird move, but we didn't really know what to do, so we took it. Since that moment in 2006, it sat on the mantel above our fireplace. The bone ended setting in motion a specific series of events that ended up coming to our family's aid later on in life, so we keep it up as a reminder of that moment. I lived behind a graveyard, too. My mom got locked out of the house. I wrote a while back about the bone I found in my graveyard, or in the backyard of my family's home, and some of the weird things that I experienced. Here's another unexplained moment. In my college years, I lived in the same town as my parents, about 15 minutes away. As an adult, I'm close with my parents and I see them regularly. So the morning my mom called me, I assumed she was going to ask me if I wanted to go get dinner or to come over. However, when I answered, I was met with a wavering voice. "Can you come over? I locked myself out." "You did? How? Which door?" "The front door. Can you please come over?" And as I pulled up to the house, my mom was standing at the front of the driveway, and her body language said that something was wrong. I made a snarky comment about needing to hide a key away. Then I walked her to the front door, and as I unlocked the door, I realized it was a deadbolt that was locked, not the doorknob lock. It made me pause before opening the door, realizing that you can't open the door with the deadbolt locked. And as I pause, she laughs and says, "You're not going to believe me." "Oh?" Went to take out the trash, and when I closed the door behind me, I even jiggled the doorknob to make sure it was unlocked, and it was. But the deadlock was locked, not the doorknob. I know, that's why I'm freaked out. When I went to go back inside, I realized the door was locked, and here's the thing, don't make fun of me. Now we're standing in the entryway, and she points to the glass panel next to the front door. You know what I'm talking about? Those decorative glass panels that would be set next to front doors? Well, she points at it and says, "I swear I saw somebody walk past and I looked inside. I swear it was Mark." She's one of 4 siblings, 2 of which had at the time this story and recently died from old age. She wasn't that close with either of them as they were significantly older than her. When they died, I know she felt conflicted on not having close relationships with them, and I know she felt more alone in the world with both of them gone, regardless of their relationships. We did a sweep of the house, checking every room and hiding spot. I don't know what they were looking for or what we would have done if we had found something or someone, but after an uneventful search, we both laughed about the whole thing and left shortly after and got to class. She was the only person in that house all day. Before he left, Mom and I both scolded the house. Knock that shit off. This wasn't the only time Mark showed up, but it wasn't the most unsettling.